Welcome to EB5 Investment Voice, where attorney insights intersects with immigration investments. If you are a foreign investor, domestic fund manager, or enterprising entrepreneur and want to get the most out of the EB5 program, you have come to the right place. I'm Mark Deal, and I'll be your co-host on this journey. I'm joined by your host, Mona Shaw, and other attorneys at Mona Shaw & Associates, as well as immigration leaders from around the world. So let's get into EB5 Investment Voice.
You know what, Mark? The EB5 Reform and Integrity Act, RIA, as we keep saying, it really did wrote a host of changes to what the simple RC operator used to do. No more. And a lot of these changes really are quite daunting.
Right. Whether you're a savvy investor or an uncertain regional center, not knowing what to do, or heck, maybe even a project and you're thinking of evolving into a regional center, this has kind of thrown, well, I'll say some uncertainty, but certainly some unknowns. And it's interesting, as we record this, by the time it's released, the listener may already have the details that we're guessing at.
Yeah, but who knows what will happen, right? So we may know what's expected, but what if, Mona, as we've discussed in the past, USCIS requires us to file not just a recertification, but a whole host of documents. And what if they take 6 months to approve or a year to approve the regional center recertification? So today, we're going to discuss is how do investors invest in a project? How can they have a spot in a project? Or how does a developer hold on to an investor's funds if they cannot invest at that time? So today we have James from Signature Bank, and we'll go through a host of different scenarios or different options that are out there for those who want to get started right away.
You're right, Rebecca. There is a lot of uncertainties out there, but specifically on this episode, we're going to be talking about fund managers and reservation agreements.
And that's why, Mark, we have today's guest, James from Signature Bank.
You're right, Rebecca. Today we have James Sozomenou. He's a relationship manager at Signature Bank, which is a full-service commercial bank voted as one of the best banks in America by Forbes magazine for 11 consecutive years. They have done billions of dollars in EB5 escrow and have seen projects as small as $1 million to just shy of $1 billion. So they've seen pretty much everything. James joined Signature Bank back in 2017 as a member of their commercial banking team, and now he oversees the EB5 activity for the group, which makes him the perfect guest for today's topic. James, welcome to EB5 Investment Voice.
I appreciate you having me on, Mark, Mona, Rebecca. It's a pleasure. I'm really excited to have this conversation today.
You know, James, Rebecca and I discussed the reaction of the industry in our last episode and really how upset the regional centers and the whole cottage industry around regional centers really are, because nobody can go out and market while we don't know when we'll actually be able to file a petition.
Yes, exactly. I think now with, no authorizations of regional centers, people want to get out, people want to get marketing, but what do you do in the meantime? You have investors, you have people who are ready to go, and everyone's just kind of sitting around waiting.
Yeah. So, James, come up with a solution. What do we tell regional centers who actually want to go out and market, or even investors who really, they like a project, they just want to get going on it?
Yeah, I wish there was a very simple answer. I talk to people every single day, whether they're old clients of ours or new clients that we have the luxury of working with, and nobody has an idea on which way they can go and what they can do. So the frustration level, it's at an all-time high, unfortunately, right now. There's just so much confusion about what's happening.
Yeah. Well, what we have been advising, and I really would like, one of the reasons we thought you were the perfect person for this podcast is so that you can really describe, is that we are advising projects to go ahead, take your client, do your paperwork, and put the money into, if you can't put it in an escrow agreement, put it in a reservation agreement.
Yeah, reservation agreement has been a product offering that we've done here for years. It's just now becoming one that is becoming almost a necessity in this space. It's allowing people to raise money without having everything done and documents ready and so forth. But it's it's been a huge opportunity for regional centers to go out there, start raising money, have their investors show good faith by sending. So it's been a great tool, and thankfully we have it at our disposal.
Well, James, what really is a reservation account? How does that differ from an escrow or any other accounts?
Sure. So in essence, it actually is an escrow account. But when we call it a reservation account, it's essentially, think of that word reservation, right? You're holding a space, you're holding a place. So what regional centers are able to do with a reservation escrow account is essentially have their investors send money in and hold their, quote, reservation into the project, right? So we know that it's very difficult in some countries to get money out. We know that there are investors that are itching to get money into the hands of, we'll call it a regional center, really to hold their space in line and to show good faith that they want to be involved in the project and they can start sending their funds immediately. So reservation account is a very simple escrow account, very straightforward type of agreement that allows folks to essentially send their money here to the States and to Signature Bank. And we hold it in escrow. And when the time is right, we release it to one of two places, either back to the investor or directly into the project once the project escrow is ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the advantages are obvious, James, but there has to be some disadvantages. Otherwise, everybody would have been using reservation agreements from the outset.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. What I've been told from folks that have contemplated using reservation escrow, maybe haven't used it in the past or didn't really know it was an option, is just the additional conversation that they have to have with whether it's migration agents or the investors themselves, depending on who's raising the capital. It's just an extra layer of conversation that they have to explain to someone as to where they're sending their money, why are they sending it to them now versus later. It's a very easy thing to explain once the regional center has an understanding of why they're going to use a product like this. And I think personally, from a marketing perspective, I think it's a great opportunity to be able to put out to investors that, hey, we can start taking your money. We're using an institution that's been involved in the industry for a long time. You can look them up. They know everything that's going on with an EB-5. They'll hold on to your funds until we are ready to do something. And it allows great opportunity for folks to go out there and raise some money.
No, I certainly agree with you with the marketing. I think, Rebecca, you and I have seen over and over that all those projects which didn't use escrow and asked clients to just wire directly into the project, there was always that little bit of a reluctance. Yeah. They felt more comfortable with a project which used escrow.
Yes, exactly. And I think, too, I thought that was a great point James brought up, that clients are going to ask, okay, you don't hear the word escrow, you hear a reservation. So what is it exactly? And it's important to know that it is an agreement that's also set in place. You're not just wiring to any account or there's no stipulation in place. There is something that what the action, if they cannot wire to the project, it will automatically go back to the...
But James, we obviously were waiting to see what USCIS comes out with and whether they do finally give into the fact that some regional centers are able to go out, the ones who've already been licensed from earlier. But let's say it takes some time. Let's say it takes 4 months, 6 months. Can a project borrow against money sitting in the reservation account, as if it's like a bridge fund type of sort of scenario?
So we've been asked this in the past, and we're very conservative in that space. We've never done so. We haven't been asked for it. The reason we haven't done so before is we still view it as those funds are not the property of the project. They are still the property of the investor. And our first fail-safe is to make sure that our investors are protected in that space. So we can't lend against it. We've been asked a few times. It's just not something that the bank is comfortable doing. And I don't think really the industry too much has been comfortable doing in the past. However, it has been brought up a few times. I think there are other better options that don't as much red tape around it, you could say, to get something like that. But because the funds aren't the property of the regional center or the project, it's very difficult to try to get someone to allow the lend against that.
Yeah, well, at least there is a vehicle for people at the moment. As I said, we don't know how long this is going to be.
Yeah, but I think that makes, like we were talking about before, Mona, it makes investors feel comfortable. So how quickly, if I'm a developer and let's say I want to set something up, how quickly could this get done?
Oh, yeah, good point.
Yeah, that's a great question. We can do it within a couple of days. And to be honest with you, the longest part of setup is us at Signature Bank waiting for the draft to come back from the folks that we're dealing with, right? So typically what happens is I'll provide someone the template that we use. The template is editable to a couple of different items, basically just you add the entity names that are in there. Once we get that back, we review it. We get a couple of documents in regards to the entities that are involved in the project, and we can open the account. I mean, we get the documents, we can open it typically same day, but really the longest lag time or lead time there is generally just waiting for the documents to come back and then have them reviewed. It's actually a very simple process.
You know, James, again, Signature Bank, and this is not a podcast for the praise of Signature Bank, but I will have to praise Signature Bank because I have to say, you guys are really out in the forefront when it comes to EB5. You were one of the first ones who really accepted capital from countries which were harder to get the capital from other banks. You understand EB5, the reservation account, and now the new requirement, thanks to this new law, is the fund administrator. And you guys have an answer again.
Well, we try to. Yeah, no, we try to. We try to stay as up to date with everything that's going on, because being an institution that's in this space and as large as we are in the space, we get a lot of questions from people that we deal with, people that maybe hope to deal with us in the future. So we have to have the best understanding possible. Fund administration has been a conversation that our team has had with countless people, whether it's folks that are already in fund administration, whether it's CPAs, attorneys that want to get in the space. It's not an easy topic.
No.
And we've had some interesting conversations for sure. We've had some very interesting conversations around who wants to get involved in this space and how do they do so. It's not for the faint of heart.
Well, for any of our listeners who are asking, well, why are we talking about fund administration? We have brought this up several times, or we've rather mentioned it in passing, but part of the Reform and Integrity Act, which we are nicknaming RIA, stated that all regional centers now require a fund administrator. They even state who it could be. There isn't any one designated person. Or instead of fund administration, I believe, Rebecca, you can file audited financials.
Yes, which I think we'll get into a bit more, but I think overall it's important to know that it's with a fund administrator, it's a third-party oversight, right? So it's not the regional center handling it. It's got to be someone outside of the NCE, the RC, the JC, who is overlooking the transferring of funds.
I want to be clear that Signature Bank won't be doing fund administration, as far as we won't be a hired fund administrator, but where our expertise lies in this industry is our relationships and connections to the best in the business that are doing this type of thing. So when we get a lot of questions about, are you going to be a fund administrator? And if not, who can you introduce us to? Who's in this space? Where should I go? Where we really excel is in our relationships with the people that are involved in EB5. It's a very small community, as you guys know.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
But it's a very complex world, right? It's a very difficult thing that we're working in. So where we think we strive and where we think we excel is doing what we do very well and then building relationships with the folks that do what they do really well. And we try to help bring the best team possible via introduction.
So you're kind of working behind the scenes and helping the fund administrator in how to set up and how things should get done.
Exactly. Where we've had a lot of conversations with folks that will be playing the fund administration space in terms of how is the bank involved in this? And I think, Mona, this goes back to something you were mentioning before about us having a really good understanding of this industry. Our legal counsel internally has a great understanding. Our compliance team has a great understanding. So we were able to develop and come up with the ways that a fund administrator can work within the bank accounts easily, whether they're going to be party to escrow, whether they're not going to be on the escrow at all and just go directly to the NCE. We've put together the best option that we think is available to fund administrators to be able to have access to the bank accounts and to whether it be through signing authorities and different natures. So that's really where we excel, is trying to come up with solutions to questions and problems.
Well, it's certainly daunting for new regional centers or even existing regional centers who really didn't do all of this before. And, there's tons and tons of webinars now on the law where the people state the law. This is what the law states. This is what you have to do. Yeah. But I really am interested in knowing your opinion. Do you think regional centers needed a fund administrator?
So Personal opinion? Personal opinion. I think the press that we've always seen about EB5 is always the negative side. And it's such a small fraction of the business that gets done in EB5. We've seen billions of dollars in escrow over a decade of the projects that we've done here at Signature Bank. So the news that you see is always the negative. There's much more positive to it. With that said, I think that what we're dealing with when it comes to being forced to play by new rules is that everyone in the space can do it. It's just a matter of figuring out what those rules are. Give me the rules of the game. I'll figure out how to play it. And I'm saying this as a service provider, an attorney, as a regional center, as a registered investment advisor, anyone that's involved in our industry. Just give me the rules and I'll figure out how to play it. Do I think it's 100% necessary that it's there? Probably not. But I do think from a macro level, it will provide great publicity that things are going well in our industry. And it'll really take down the very small fraction of bad players that we have. It's going to eliminate them completely, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. But as we know, and we were discussing this before, Mona, fund administration is not new, right? It's new to EB5, or it's not even new to EB5 because it has been used by regional centers in the past. It's just that it's now a requirement.
I think we've had some bad experiences, unfortunately, on people who've used fund administration.
Yes, we've had some disasters. And James, what we have seen is that it's great that they will send us and said the money has been transferred to here, and they'll confirm that everything has been done correctly. And then we actually look into the bank statements, and it's a completely opposite of what they've said. So I think it's important that we're talking about fund administration, and it's important to know who's going to be handling it and the oversight that's going to happen, because you just don't want someone to say, oh, I'm just going to listen to what the regional center says and just sign off on it. It has to be done in the right way.
Yeah. I also think that, it's important for someone like Signature Bank to sign off on the correct person, because, again, you're going to open another cottage industry and you're going to have all of these people, CPAs and whoever, who really don't know what they're doing. And as Rebecca says, we've seen people's 829s messed up because of bad accounting.
Oh, yes.
Not bad projects.
Bad accounting. Yeah. I mean, to speak to that, as I mentioned earlier, we talk to a lot of people, whether it's regional centers, CPAs, developers, and we turn down probably more projects and more relationships than we actually take on. And this topic of fund administration is one where we've received a lot of phone calls. I've had a lot of meetings and conversations with folks. They may be a fund administrator, but they don't understand the essence of EB5 and they don't really get the kind of nuances. So what I've been interested in, and I've had some conversations with other folks, and I'm interested to hear, Mona and Rebecca, what you guys think. Do you think it's better for a fund administrator, so just a classic fund administrator, to get involved in this business and have to learn EB5, or someone that understands EB5 now have to learn how to be a fund administrator? Which way do you think is the better option to go?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Turned it around on us.
I have my belief to it. I'm curious to yours, and then I'll tell you what I think.
Okay, well, here's my view, and I'm sure Rebecca has a different view. I feel that so much has happened over the years and involved that, it takes someone with a real understanding. However, we have also come across people who have been in the industry for some years, but are bent on their own beliefs. And maybe it's better to have someone new come in and learn afresh, and then not be sort of tainted by the old. I don't think you agree with me, Rebecca, right? You think experience is important?
I get it. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, but I also think, because this industry has, and maybe because of their new rules, but the industry has just been through so much. And I think it's important for people to understand how and right now for someone to come in, I've been in it for over 11 years, and I feel like I still don't know enough, but bringing someone new in, it all depends. But I feel like having that background and the experience would help.
Maybe it all depends on who's brought in the industry and the motivation to bring that particular group into the industry. Maybe it's something that the industry needs or the direction that people want the industry to go, but it takes what we'll call outsiders to come into the industry to make it happen.
Well, here's what my fear is, Mark, and the costs are going to go up incredibly for regional centers. I mean, who's going to bear the costs? There's only a limit to how much one can expect to give to the investor. Mm-hmm. I feel like the dynamics of EB5 marking is just going to go out of the window because maybe the agent is not going to get it. Or maybe the better projects are not going to come in because they're going to think that it's just too expensive. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I think cost becomes a great issue here. I've had multiple conversations trying to figure out where this cost is going to come from. It's such a small fraction that gets paid to the investors to begin with. There's really not a lot you can peel back from there. My initial thought was that admin fees were just going to go through the roof. I don't know if that's where it's going to come from. And now with all the integrity measures about having to show exactly who you pay and how much, I think there's some questions as to how that gets done with this as well. But, a fund administrator, I think, has to be reasonably priced in order to be able to fit inside of a project, because if they're not reasonably priced, I think that's where folks now become very interested in audited financials, which I don't really know a ton about the costs to those, but I would guess that that's something they can actually explore.
We have experienced audited financials, James. Here's the issue. Number one, they're very expensive. And number two, it's like trying to do an 829 when you're about 2 weeks away from the filing date. There's no room for making changes. So with a fund administrator, because you're working in real time, you can always do something. You can always make changes if there's a mistake. But with audited financials, if you're coming back the following year, you are not able to do anything.
I've been saying this from a personal perspective from day one when we heard about fund administration and comparing it to audited financials. I think if you're using the right fund administrator and they're doing the things they're supposed to be doing, which you're relying on them to do so, that's why you're paying them and that's why they're in the industry, that if there's something happening, you can see it in real time and not have to worry about 8, 9, 10 months down the road going, oh my goodness, did we make a mistake? And now everything from there has created a snowball effect where the mistakes can compound, or is that one simple mistake that I made 7, 8 months ago, is that going to cost me my regional center? Is that going to cost me my ability to continue to do this? So my personal belief is fund administration makes a lot of sense. I'm not a regional center, so I don't know all the nuances and ins and outs versus going with the audited financials. But I think if I were running a regional center, I personally would opt for fund administration.
I think if I was an investor as well, I would opt for the fund administrator, because Mona, like you were getting to, it's the fact that you can catch that mistake or do something quick if it's caught on time, rather than waiting months down the road. And what if it hurts the person getting the green card? What if it hurts their I-829, right? Because you have to show the path of funds for the I-829, moving from one account to the other. And if it's moved to the wrong entity and you're finding that out an entire year later, that's going to cost someone their green card.
Yeah, but a fund administrator can be anybody. It could be a broker, it can be a CPA, it can be a lawyer. I suppose it could just be a bookkeeper even. Who knows what he's doing? Yeah,
exactly. But so it goes back to where we were saying that you need to get someone who understands the industry. They understand, it cannot go to that entity versus this entity, because the NCEs, JCEs are going to be really important in all of this. So I think who you're using is going to be very important.
My question earlier about, is it better to use a fund administrator that understands EB5 or vice versa? It was kind of a trick question because I really think that I was just testing to see how, where we were going with it. Sorry. But I think it's, we work in such a nuanced industry. And as you guys both mentioned earlier, fund administration is not new. It's just new to the grand scale of EB5. I've worked at plenty of regional centers who have had a fund administrator on their project since day one. However, when it comes to who to choose, I do think the people that you choose to do your fund administration, they really do need to have an understanding of EB5. They don't need to be experts 100% across the board, but they really do need to have an understanding of it, because there's a lot at risk other than just money. We're talking about livelihoods of people. So, yes. Rebecca, as you just mentioned, the immigration part of this sometimes gets lost when we talk about fund administration, because we think about that, or folks may think about that as only money. but there's a lot more involved when it comes to fund administration, and that being the livelihood of people trying to come to the United States. And this is the route they decided to do it.
You're absolutely right, James. It's not just the investor. And you guys see this. If a project is, especially if a project's operational, it suddenly gets bombarded with denials. And maybe the denials are just because of innocent mistakes, nothing to do with the actual project, which happens all the time. It's the project itself, as the people within the project employees. There are so many reverberations for errors in this area.
Yeah, there's a gigantic snowball effect that happens on a number of different levels, a number of different topics that can affect the project, the investors, the principals. I mean, there are so many things at play when it comes to doing an EB-5 investment, that having the right people in place and working with the right people, working with good projects, it really helps mitigate a lot of those concerns and those questions. And the marketing aspect of that, I think, is very big as well. If you're good in this space, I think you will continue to be good in this space, regardless of the rules that are thrown out at us. We just need a clarification of what those rules are, and then let us go play. Let us go figure this out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The projects and the regional centers, which were applying with best practices, were doing it before. They're doing it now.
Yeah, and like we said, it's nothing new, right? And if these regional centers were doing it before, or if, even from keeping good records and following through with all the bank statements, I don't see it being an issue moving forward.
James, will Signature Bank be vetting the fund administration?
So depending on their level of involvement and what accounts we hold for the project, because there's a varying degree of our relationship to some of these projects. So yes, there will be some vetting. It may not be as scrutinous, we'll say, as maybe some others that are involved in the projects. But if they are going to be involved in any way, shape, or form with an escrow account, yes, we will have some questions about who they are, get some understanding of who they are, do the OFAC checks and the whole nine, because as an institution that's holding the money, we're certainly putting ourselves in the position of the immigration process and of the project. So we have to make sure that the folks that are coming to us and that are involved with us are as clean as we could possibly want them.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things which did come out of RIA was the fact that foreign developers could not be part of a regional center, because we were seeing foreign developers utilizing their own CPAs and their own bookkeeping and oversight, if that's what they want to call it, overseas. And there was absolutely no way that we could track anything. Right, Rebecca?
Yeah, and especially if something goes wrong, it's 10 times harder to get to them. So, I think that
you can't sue them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that has helped.
Yeah, I think there are some real positives inside of the legislation we have. I think there's a lot of question marks, if you want to call them negatives as well, inside of it. But I think once the details get ironed out, we're in for a very good run. I talk to a lot of projects that are just itching to get their project to the masses, right? Whether it's rural or industrial or, a beautiful hotel in a very prominent area, they're ready to go. And
big circle.
We just need the green light. I mean, it's really what it comes down to. We just need the green light.
Yeah.
Right now it's yellow. A lot of people tell you it's very deep red. I try to be optimistic and say that it's a little bit more of the amber yellow traffic light that we have right now. We just haven't gotten to that green light yet. I'm an optimist, if you can't tell.
We try to be as well.
I like to consider myself an optimist too. Whether we have the green light or still waiting on that yellow or red light, it's always helpful to look both ways before crossing the street. James, thank you for being on EB-5 Investment Voice and helping us by holding our hands as we cross this uncertain street together.
It was my pleasure. I look forward to doing this again. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for being with us today on EB-5 Investment Voice. The topics presented in this podcast is informational in nature and is not to be taken as specific legal advice. If you have questions on the topics presented in this episode or other investment immigration needs, please contact Mona Shaw & Associates. Mona and her attorney staff can be reached at mshawlaw.com. That's mshawlaw.com. shahlaw.com. Make sure you don't miss our next episode focusing on a different aspect of the EB5 program by subscribing to the podcast. While you're at it, leave us a rating on iTunes. If you really found this episode valuable, share it with someone else that could benefit from this information. Until then, I'll see you on the next episode of EB5 Investment Voice.